Okay, I think that's us starting again. Welcome to the Life Sound Studies Online Symposium. Um, we will have now our third and last table. So let me introduce. And the table's name is let me read it. Culture and use. We'll have two panelists. Um, First one, Pierre Prouteau is a researcher and teaching assistant in anthropology of sound, interested in the effects of music, sound, and technologies on societies. His PhD thesis, defended in 2021, analyzes the sound systems in provincial Thailand. He has worked on Southeast Asian sound archives in the project VCOSIS, where he worked on putting music database online and formulating a critical approach to colonial sound archives. The title of his presentation is Performance, Popularity, Loudness, the case of Thailand sound systems as a contribution to live sound studies. Thank you very much, Pierre, for joining us.
Hi everybody, thanks for the invitation and thanks for organizing this very inspiring event. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me just begin to share my screen. Can everybody see the screen well? All right. My talk and my research is not one of a sound engineer, and yet my object of study is the sound system. So maybe I will give a brief definition of how I understand sound system here. I understand it as an electroacoustic apparatus composed minimally of a sound source, an amplifier, and loudspeaker, and therefore amplifies and transforms sound. The specificity of sound system is that it focuses on intensity of sound first, on intensity of sound first in a collective and ideally public setting. It also focuses through sound, I believe, on the intensity of the collective. So my question here today is how do the study of sound systems use this in Thailand can contribute to the live sound studies that is the program here. So their use is generalized in a variety of settings, such as rituals, as you can see on the pictures. Also on various stage settings, such as you can see here. And here in one of the most important molam, which is a musical jar specific to the Northeast and to the Laos culture. But also in processional settings. So I give here a few examples of these processional sound systems that you can find in Thailand. Here are others examples. They can also be others kind of settings as the one you can see here or even here during rituals also. On a daily basis, there are some systems also wired through a grid of several hundred of loudspeakers in a given town here, for example. Like this is quite widespread in provincial Thailand too. And in this short presentation, I will go down a hierarchy I have been given as the usual way things go with live sound in Thailand. And in Thailand, I think there is this conception that live sound is the best experience. And then we go down from live sounds to recorded sound. And I will each time give examples according to this process of going down the hierarchy. Electroacoustics generally, and more specifically sound system, has been of tremendous potential for musicians in Thailand, just like anywhere else. It has opened up possibilities really unheard of before. So if you yeah, that's the hierarchy. Sorry, I was talking about. Um, um, the just to be a bit precise with one term, to say that music is played live, you say it's sot. Sot means fresh, like a fruit would be fresh, for example. And in this hierarchy, another important aspect is if the music is famous or not. So famous is the same term. Maybe I will go back to it at one point. To say famous is the same as to say loud in Thai language. So maybe I will go back to this really important relationship between the two, between popularity and loudness. So electroacoustic and sound systems have opened up possibilities for musicians, and which is at the oh God, how do I say, at the roots of processional bands that use amplifiers and loudspeakers, such as it is here. And so this kind of band is a processional band, and they are actually electrified one traditional instrument that you see here on the left of the pictures in the double neck version here, and it has allowed them to be plugged to these rolling sound systems. Maybe I can make you listen so that you understand how, to what extent electroacoustic has also been of importance here. So here it is. So there's a lot of use of reverberation, echoes, distortion too, and it is really part of the style, processional style of playing this kind of lute. Maybe I can give another example. Here is one of the latest trends in processional band that is called sound truck. I give here a rough translation. So these sound trucks are 36 degrees, have loudspeakers on their four sides actually, and it's a really how could I say, it's really potent. The sound is like you can hear it from maybe 20 kilometers away, and so this is the last trend. When you organize a procession during ritual and want to hire the best band around, so you hire this kind of processional track, and the band is sitting on the platform you see on the lower picture where the guy is speaking with the mic. So this is where the band stands and play for the whole procession that lasts for usually for many hours. Maybe I can show you one. Can you still see it there? Can you see my screen, the YouTube screen? Yeah.
Yep. Not the YouTube screen, just
Not the YouTube
your
screen.
slide there.
If I do that?
I think not, just a slide.
All right.
I
That's
think
okay. I just
if
put
you
the
want to.
music in.
Okay.
Just to give you an idea. Okay, so that's how it goes here. I was at the really lowest level on my microphone and on my sound recorder, and still it was like the sound was really distorted because the bass were so heavy and vibrating everything around. So these are an example of how live music understood as like a performance with a maybe we could say traditional instrument, even amplified or even in a electronic version of it. Maybe I can go down a little bit on that hierarchy to speak about what I think it was coined by Pierre, which is like the mixed regime. The mixed regime, if I recall well, is when you mix real instruments. I put brackets in there. Real instruments and electrical recordings, and this is of absolutely this. Even if it's down in the hierarchy, it doesn't pose any kind of problems in the Thai music of in the Thai understanding of making music. So this is possible when, for example, there is a DJ mix. So they listen to DJ mix in clubs and other settings, but they would not consider it as good as live music, as I said. This was like another like really usual moment during a ritual, and this player here, so the same kind of lute I was talking about, is actually like tuning to music that is passing by in front of him, and each time adapting himself to the recorded music that was broadcasted from the procession in front of him. So really basic example here, I would say. But we must also consider one activity that is, I would say, almighty in the region, that is karaoke. And karaoke is the very definition of a mixed regime of making music. And it's also the very first step when you want to talk about entertainment, for example, during rituals, like night entertainment. If you want to organize one night entertainment, the basic activity you can propose, even with very little money then, and you don't need to hire a band, is to organize a karaoke session. So here are a few examples. And if I want to go down another step, maybe to the one that is considered the lowest in the hierarchy, is to just play songs. They would say, so to play songs from already existed recordings. What is interesting during these moments, and it's possible to of course to encounter them in Thailand, just like anywhere else. But what is interesting is that it straight away focus on the one that is playing those recordings, which are most of the time the sound engineers. And even if those their instrumental manipulation is minimal, even if we can very much discuss it, considering their importance in Thailand, again, just like anywhere else. But yet it shifts the focus on different aspects of sound production and of electroacoustic of sound production that is electroacoustic. These practice of sound engineers in Thailand. I don't know if the term exists in English, but there is also a practice that is audiophilia. Like it's people who enjoy specifically gears for amplification, for sound system gears, and their activity has extended to such importance that they organize a competition between walls of loudspeakers. So you can see here only the amplifiers, and these are the walls they built, and they compete about who is gonna have the best sound and the best sound is the sound that is the loudest. So sound systems has actually allowed a sound engineer to make a kind of experimental and prospective, in a very scientific way, I would say, into perception, into a regime, a new regime of perception, new regime, but that is still like maybe 100 years old now. And what is interesting is that it's not considered as music, and the music that is played during those competition is usually completely estranged to Thai aesthetics, because it's like really heavy techno that is actually not listened for its aesthetical quality, but that is listened because it gives the best out of the gear. So maybe I will give just a brief example, and you have to imagine that they are not dancing on this music. They are just like the guy you can see on the image. They are just listening to what the gear has in itself, you know. So I play it very quickly. Okay, so I play it really very briefly. So really, like, people are not moving, they are just like listening deep into the sound in front of it. If I recall well, the sound was 120 decibels at 20 meters away from the walls. So it was, I think I don't know the laws but in France they say, like, if you stay more than 7 seconds in such sound intensity, you already lose some capacities, oral capacities. That will be it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pierre, for such an interesting topic. I'm sure lots of questions will arise there, and yeah, I wonder about those sound levels from, you know, being present there. I think, well, anyway, there is a lot of questions. Let's now go to Daniel Nordgård, who is professor in music business and management at the University of Agder. Nordgård's research and publications focus on understanding better the music industry's digital transitions. He has a broad background from music, foremost as musician and artist, but he also has experience from concert promotion and festival management. His presentation today is titled Seeing and Hearing, How Crisis Informs Research on Norwegian Sound Engineers. Thank you again for being here, Daniel.
Thank you for including me and inviting me to this. I'm very excited about this because I usually work on the digitalization on the music industry, and I'm preoccupied with recorded music for the most. But I came out from live music, and both as a musician and as a promoter. And so, in many ways, it's great to also, you know, delve into some of the issues on that part of the sector. And I've been taking notes. I've really enjoyed listening in, and this project is part of a writing process of a book chapter for a book that is going to be included in a book that I'm doing together with Sergio on live music or live engineering, live sound engineers. I also so I have to make two notes. One is that some of what I'm gonna talk about is perhaps a little bit basic to many of you who, you know, where this is your, you know, the core of your research and academic interest, and also that I usually work with qualitative research, and I usually use research interviews as my main mode of methods, and in this part I'm using surveys and quantitative research. So I'm a little bit on a deep end. So please keep that in mind, and I'm very interested in hearing what you have to say and having some feedback. All right, so seeing and hearing how crisis informs research on Norwegian sound engineers, and this is the work is based on from my own and one of my former master students called Øystein Flemmen, who is himself a sound engineer, and he now works as a producer at a concert and theater house in Kristiansand. So the background for all of this is an initiative that came in 2019 from Kulturom, and Kulturom is a Norwegian publicly funded, government-funded institution that provides sound equipment and light equipment for major music venues in Norway. And just as in full openness, I used to be chairman of the board of that organization for I think 9 years, but left some years ago, and I was not affiliated with the organization in any way at that time. But in 2019, there was an initiative by Kulturom that they need to have more insights on the work conditions of the Norwegian live sound engineers and to understand better the training and education and recruitment processes. And the goal was to decide on the start of a live sound and light engineer study program and to decide what that would include and also what it would look like and where they would facilitate it. And and they asked me if I want to help them to navigate on this and provide them reports for them to decide on. And for me, of course, this was an opportunity to understand better a very important but very under-researched part of the music sector, the live sound engineers. So you know, I said yes, and of course, as we all know, COVID-19 happened, and we had to postpone a little bit the survey, and the survey also had to reshape a little bit, and of course, we had to focus on the pandemic and the impacts of pandemic. Nonetheless, we did manage to gather some really good data, and which I still find valuable, and which I'm going to include in the book chapter I'm currently writing. All right. This is first of its kind in Norway. It's, as I said, an under-researched group, and it's also an unorganized group. And what we found out quite quickly was that it was very difficult to reach and to find. So there were, unlike the musicians and the artists and the labels, there were no organization that we could reach out to and say, look, can you spread this to your members? Can we meet your members? There were no organization and no member list, and the only way for us to, which I'll come back to shortly, the only way for us to reach was actually two major Facebook groups, one on live sound engineers and one on live light engineers, and this was the way that we could reach them. And which I think that in itself very much demonstrates the position of live sound engineers and light engineers in Norway and probably also elsewhere. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. This has been really well described by other people before me today. I'm just going to say I did like what I can't remember our French colleague who did also do you remember Sergio?
Andy Batentier?
Yes, and he did mention a really good point, which I also think, because I come at this from a more sociological perspective, not from a sound perspective, and I do think that this is, you know, indeed very much an under-researched group, and there's a growing body of research on live music and very much on the significance between the connection point between live music and recorded music, and how the economic power balance has shifted from recorded to live music since the turn of the millennium. And there's been a surge in the academic focus, both on the importance of live, the experience of live, but also the importance of live from everything from municipality, local communities, but very often with an economic perspective, which has also been criticized by people like Fabian Holt on how too much of the research on that sector has been tilted towards economic/capitalistic issues, and that there's a need to shift focus a little bit more. Like I said, we did do 2 surveys, and we also did research interviews. We only did research interviews with 4 sound engineers. The 2 surveys were done in 2020, the spring and the autumn. As you can see, we had 244, 262, which was both sound and light engineers. I've taken out, for this purpose, I've taken out the light engineers, and I've only focused on sound engineers, which provides us with 188 respondents. And I think that if we look at what the population could be, and again, the problem being that we don't have any organization or anything else to be, we think that the population is around 2,000 in Norway-ish. There's also this other very difficult problem that came when we started the project, which was that we could not count on company registration, because very often it turned out that very often the companies were registered in a previous period of their professional life. And very often, as I'll return to, many of them were musicians before and then turned sound engineers. So if we looked for the description of their companies or their company code, that would very often be musician and not a sound engineer, which would make it very difficult. All right, so our data is based on the 188 respondents and 4 in-depth research interviews. So I'm going to do a little bit some of the more general features of the data, which I find interesting, although not very surprising. But one of the first is, of course, it's a very male-dominated sector, and from the response we have 10% being female and 90% being male. And there was an interesting in the process. There was an interesting reaction to this question, and we had emails on women sound engineers responding, saying, "Look, we don't want to answer this," and there was a bit of a anger on why we were actually asking gender. And during one of the interviews with one of the women, female sound engineer, one of the what they explained was that they were so tired of having to describe or having to being described within a gender framework, which is totally understandable. And they were so tired of having to defend themselves or being discussed within that even asking in the survey was difficult, which meant that in the reporting that we delivered, the gender issue was downplayed completely, because and we didn't make a lot of it because for the report this was not really an issue. It was on the educational part, but it also seemed important, but we did have some methodological and some ethical discussions on that part afterwards. I haven't been able to translate some of these, so I'm going to translate it for you. But we asked about job satisfaction, and this is one. It's pretty extreme. When asked if they agree to the statement that they like their job, 97% say they completely agree or partly agree. So 75% say they completely agree that they love their job. They like what they do. Which is, it's difficult to see other jobs that have the same type of job satisfaction. That said, they also say that work is in conflict with family and friends. 91% agree fully or partly that this is a challenge. 53% disagree that this is a job that you can grow old in. That this is something that you can stay in until retirement age. Only 9% completely agree. 25% partly agree. But overall, it's I have to say it's remarkable to see the dedication to it and love for the work that we saw. There is one disclaimer that we have to put in, and that is that we did do the survey when the pandemic hit, and we cannot rule out that some, if not all, were they had just lost the fact that they could. So you may be nostalgic and looking back to what you had, and that could, of course, have influenced the responses. We also asked about artistic or tactical, what type of competences they consider to be the most important. And this, I think, is really interesting. Technical competences were considered the least important. Economic competences and project management were both seen as extremely important. And you have to keep in mind that 80% of all of them are self-employed, so simply running their business and having to set up, run their project was also extremely important. But social competences were really important, and during the interviews, this was also made some points of, which I'll come back to, and of course also the artistic competences, and which is 3.3, 5 being the most important and 1 being the least important. Because this draws into the educational part. So where do we put it? And when we did the interviews with many of the interviewees, for them, it was really important for them to say that they were part of the artistic creation, the artistic process. And it seemed to be a need to also be recognized for the artistic contributions for the concert or the show. About the social competences, one of the interviewers made notions of the differences between live and studio engineers and the need for social competences. And one of them said, okay, so all those social and psychological skills you need are perhaps not that important in studio. This is perhaps not 100% accurate because you still need to work with musicians, but not in the same way. When you work live, everything has to happen at once, and sometimes under extreme stress. So you really need to have your head in order. You need to know how to talk to people, and you need to know that when people talk to you in an unfair manner, you leave it until the day after. So a lot of people stress that this is one of the very significant differences, and many of them work both as a live engineer and as a studio sound engineer. And this was one of the things that they put forward, and many of them saying that they preferred the live sound engineer over the studio engineer, partly because of the intensity of the experience. We also asked about how they ended up in becoming a live music engineer, and the blue one is that they started off as a musician and eventually became a live sound engineer. So the majority of them came from performing and being a musician. The green one, part of the same way, but actually from church or from which was considered a quite big recruitment process. But for the most part, the group is autodidact, with recruitment mainly going through different types of practices. 48% of our respondents have only finished primary school. 32 has a bachelor's degree and 2% has a master's degree. Really important part here is that the degrees are spread on a multitude of differing topics or fields with differing relevance for sound engineering. And they would be everything from historian, nurse, teacher, car mechanic, and a range of others. And which kind of suggests that part of this is also being a student. So the student period is also a recruitment area. I'm starting to work with concerts as a volunteer. I'm starting to wrap it up. So one of the things was that the pandemic pushed through a focus on light and sound engineers in Norway. And one of the reasons for this was that the sector lost a lot of many, skilled workers who just left the sector entirely. And a question became, how do we recruit new ones? And in many of the other sectors, that could be fairly easy, because you could say that, all right, we just have to push through. If we need more kindergarten teachers or nurses, we know that that is a 3-year long education program or 4-year education program. And if we push it and if we make it lucrative, we know that within this many years, we'll have enough manpower to fill the gap. In this sector, you can't do it because we don't have the type of educational system or the program. And it's also so much dependent on the practice of work. So that was, to try and find out, how to build such a study program became emphasized by the pandemic. And then there was also a question of which field such a program would, go under. The survey suggests that the arts have a bias towards music performance and art, or that the field has a bias towards music performance and artistic competences. However, the engineering or the technical side is very often emphasized. And I think in hindsight, I think the pandemic and the discussions that we had was a missed opportunity to discuss the academic professional affiliations of the sector. And this is something that I'm hoping to address in my book chapter, which is coming out in not too long time. And that was it.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for another great presentation. What do you say if we've got around 15 minutes, 20 minutes to ask some questions. If you would like them to, if you'd like, just write them in the chat or not. If not, just raise your hand and you can, of course, ask question out loud. Joss, I think you want to start.
Yeah, thank you both for these presentations. I just had a question for Pierre. And to what extent did you compare this specific Thai sound system reference to the one that's well documented in Jamaica? And if you've been able to do some comparative analysis or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons, it's not the only one, but one of the reasons why I decided to use this term to identify this precise apparatus is to make also possible some kind of comparison. So I didn't, I know about the Jamaican sound systems, but I didn't really studied it to its full extent, so it's difficult to answer. But I would say that in terms of sound, it's a different kind of focus. The focus is on loudness, like really sheer loudness and sheer physical impact in the case of the Thai sound systems. And I would say that it's more focused on bass, but on Jamaican sound systems. But what I'm saying is really so general. Maybe it would be contradicted with proper field work. I think this is one of my goal, one of my objective with using this term. At least that's what I can say.
Thank you.
And actually, sorry, not only the Jamaican sound systems, but also all kinds of sound systems all around the world. It's the techno sound systems. It's the I know that in Mexico, it's maybe the Sonideros sound systems. Yeah, it's also an open category. Yeah, thank you for your question.
Thank you, Pierre. While we wait for another person to write a question or to raise their hand, Daniel, perhaps this is not a question, but I felt totally connected with you when you're talking about difficulties to find sound engineers, to see these actors, sound engineers, sound technicians. I was part of a project about finding sound engineers in Peru, specifically female engineers, which was a more difficult task. It was a project about gender and live sound in Peru, and it struck me the difficulty to see just sound engineers, how they are spread, how they communicate, how difficult it was to actually have a systematic approach to sound engineers. And it was only in Lima. In Peru, in different places, I imagine the situation might be a bit more difficult, where they're even less organized. But yeah, so that aspect of just reaching out to the people we want to study, the practices, the professional activities, that's already a major issue, I think, when we think about live sound studies, right? It's not like other disciplines, and of course it relates to other disciplines where they have the same difficulties, but I think that is worth highlighting when we do research on this topic. As general comment.
Yeah, it's probably the same elsewhere, but it's been a very, very difficult and very disparate group of people to locate and to find. And I think actually one of the things that came out of the pandemic is that the light and sound engineers organize themselves a little bit better, at least in Norway.
Yeah, I just Daniel, in the same period, I did an international survey of live sound engineers, more around sound levels and attitudes. And even though I have access to a big international network of sound engineers who are in the profession, who know each other, we didn't get more than 2,000. No, what did we have? Just over 3,000 responses worldwide. So even, and that's from people within, not even external academics. So they're really hard to get, which is interesting because it's, we've already talked about how hard it is to educate these people, or how sometimes they're just not there.
Yeah.
Jacob, you wanted to ask a question as well?
Yes, please. Just about job satisfaction, Daniel. You said that the response was very, very high for job satisfaction. But you mentioned that maybe there was a link between nostalgia and it's easy to be excited about mixing a show when you're not mixing a show, sort of thing. That's something that I've encountered myself, and I'm wondering if anybody has a method to get around that, like doing interviews outside of shows or surveys outside of shows, or during a pandemic when there are no shows. It's just gonna, if that is indeed the cause of this super high result you got, or a cause, yeah. I'm just curious if you or anybody has an idea to get around that.
Well, I don't, but perhaps if we did more interviews, I think that could probably be one way into it. But I think it would be super interesting to work a little bit closer and to find out what it is that because there are so many things that for any normal person would not be, very tempting. The work hours, the work type, the physical labor, all of this, and yet you know, they you get this response. So to find it could be adrenaline. You know, and I know this from working with music festivals over the years. One of the parts that I really miss is the adrenaline, the extreme, because I can't think of any other way that I can experience the same type of intensity as when you open and you have, you know, in our case, 20,000 people coming in, and it's, you know, there's no turning back. You know, it just has to, and that kind of feeling, you know, it could be that, you know, you're adrenaline junkie in some way.
Yeah, Jess?
Yeah, just want to echo that. And I think it's one of the things I segued into academia. I think I worked 15 years as a sound engineer, and this is my 15th year in academia. And I'm still struggling with the incredible long timelines of academia.
Yeah.
Whereas on the tour, on the concert, on the musical production, there is the longer timeline of the whole tour, but then the timeline of the day, which you're exactly adrenaline shot when the show starts and everything's working, and at the end when when the last box goes back in the truck, you know, is wonderful. It's addictive and quite. I'm sure there's other professions where you get that, but I don't think there are many. Well, the light engineer and the other crew.
The closeness to the music as well, maybe to music you love, not just like, or just you're a fan of, might be a reason, maybe to answer your question, Jacob, more directly. I interviewed like 100 sound engineers working in the late 60s and the early 70s, and it struck me, it really was very, very interesting to me to find out that even though there was a moment where this was a moment where people were literally dying, having so many road accidents because the industry didn't exist whatsoever, right? All over the place, and working, if now people work insane hours in an uncontrolled environment like the late 60s, it was really madness all over the place. I would say 100% of the people I interviewed were really enjoying the work, and that's why they were doing it. That's why they were involved in the first place. This might be, of course, a biased conclusion, because I mean, I interview people working with high-profile rock bands at the moment, but again, it might give you some clues about what you were asking. Just wanted to fill in. And Jacob, you want to say something else as well, sir?
Yeah, just to Pierre to talk about these massive structures that you have photographs and recordings of. Did you get a sense of who was actually building those structures, doing those installations?
Yes, it was brands of audio gear on one side, and their opponent was actually the abbot of the Buddhist temple, because monks really enjoy also their audiophilia. They are people who enjoy building sound systems and understand how sounds work. So actually, but the fact that he was the abbot who was the builder, it was not that clear. But I'm pretty sure that it is, because if he loses, then his whole temple lose kind of credit, I would say. So it was not that clear, but I'm pretty sure it was like that. So yeah, audio gear, they make promotion, but they are also like a really sound amateur. They love sound. And just to maybe to say about the reasons why sound engineers are sound engineers in Thailand, they say it clearly. They are passionate about sound, and they also, like, their whole family and friends complain about that, because they rent the gear for so little money compared to the price they buy all those gears. But still, they love it. They are passionate about it, and they don't give it up, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, so Nick.
Pierre, I have a question. I thought that was really interesting. My family lived in Thailand for 3 or 4 years, and my daughter was born there. And I really loved looking at your pictures. I was wondering if you would say a little bit more about the relationship of loudness and popularity, and what did you think was behind that, just from kind of a cultural standpoint?
For me, this is like a kind of popular media theory. And in popular, I mean that it is shared by everyone. So when you ask people and sound engineers, they know about that. They are not the one who impulse that, but they do according to people's aesthetic. And they say that maybe 95% of the people like the sound loud. So as I say, it's just one term of the whole media theory equation. Because loud is also popularity. So for me, it's a kind of media theory that is based also on resonance, maybe, and echo, because and a kind of virtuous circle that is really appreciated too. So if, for example, a song is good, then everybody will sing it. All the professional bands, all the people will play it on their cell phones, sound systems, etc. So then it becomes louder. But because when it becomes louder, then more people are listening to it too, are hearing it at least, and get maybe more appreciation about that song. So it gets even louder because it's
So
more.
volume is kind of like cultural visibility.
Yes, it's also power, it's audibility, it's visibility translated to audio, and it's clear. It's clear that when you ask people, they say, yeah, the louder is the better, and they just say it like that, and they say it as if it was the most basic of things to say. So
well, it's funny how the conventions are so different in different countries. Yeah.
Yes, and for example, there is no word for noise. There is no word.
Exactly. We found that out when we lived there.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question.
Any other questions? I written or I'm gonna check the chat. Just double check. No.
I have a question for Daniel before we tie up.
Yes, Nick. Sorry, just.
Or do you want to just finish it off?
No. There is one question here.
Okay, well, go ahead then.
You. I'll give you the word
I can
right after this.
save mine.
Pierre. On that note, would you there? Is an interesting parallel to be made with extreme music scenes such as metal or noise. Do you think would you say there's an interesting parallel there to be made with these genres?
So one interesting thing it's that the extreme music scenes, metal, noise music scenes is basically inexistent in Thailand. And if we think that, I don't know, maybe this aspect of extreme intensity and like really experimental ways of enjoying sound, then I would say it is partly taken, how can I say? It's one of the role of all these sound engineers through the sound systems and the way people enjoy it. But one of the things that sound system culture in provincial Thailand, where I was, it's not underground culture, as I say. As I said, it's really shared. It's generalized. Everybody loves it. It's not and I'm not saying it in a bad way. It's not like a subversive group of underground aesthetic who like represent some kind of extreme. No, it's the main and most shared aesthetic in the provinces, I would say.
Great, thanks for that explanation, Nick. Sorry, I cut you out. You wanted to say something else? You wanted to add?
I was just going to touch on that job satisfaction topic again. I was wondering if it might substantially differ. I've only been in Norway once, really briefly, but if it would differ substantially in Norway, from the United States, just as it would in other industries because of kind of attitudes towards labor and things like work-life balance? Or do you think that the nature of live sound work tends to put it more on an equal footing because of the challenges of the job?
Well, yeah, I think perhaps it would be different, and I think maybe it could explain all of it, but I think we might see, or I would expect that there would be some differences between Norway and the US, and some part of it perhaps being that the sound engineers are, even though it's not very organized, they do have some how do you say, job security. The government has imposed some minimum wage, which is higher than the musicians' minimum wage. So it's fairly high, compared to, and so I would imagine that you wouldn't see that necessarily in the US, but you would see that in Norway, being halfway communist compared to, so that, but there's also one thing that I didn't put up, which was that they also, which is quite opposite to what I was expecting, because I was expecting that which was whether they consider themselves to have a highly regarded in society, or to be and I think almost 65% say that they consider themselves valued and their job valued, which, and I'm doing a similar type of survey now on musicians and artists, which I've also kind of forecasted that I would expect them to not consider themselves valued or highly regarded in society, but they answer much the same, that they do consider themselves, which is great. But it's a little bit opposite to what I was expecting, to be honest.
Right. On that note, Daniel, but thanks for sharing that ongoing research, and good luck with the rest of it. It definitely